Herald Sun today is driving at something. I perhaps get the impression that the report in the Herald Sun has been heavily legal. It's about Essendon, about the doping scandal, about Andrew Demetriou. Its headline is Night of Crisis. And the first paragraph says this: anti-doping investigators have been told of a phone call made by AFL boss Andrew Demetriou to Essendon President David Evans the night before the club self-reported for the potential use of performance-enhancing drugs. I guess the implication is that Andrew Demetriou tipped them off. On the line is the Chief Executive of the AFL, Andrew Demetriou. Good morning.
Good morning, Al.
What do you think they're claiming here?
Well, they rang me yesterday to ask me again, and they've asked me this before, and we were asked by other media organisations whether I tipped off David Evans before they came forward the day before, and I stated yesterday categorically, as I did on previous occasions now, that I did not, and that I did not for one simple reason, that I didn't know who the club in question was. Well, the AFL wasn't aware of who the club was in question because the ACC, who briefed us a few days earlier on the Thursday, wouldn't disclose to us who the clubs involved were. So it's simply untrue. And what the Herald Sun has chosen to do today is now say that it was a discussion. There absolutely was a discussion that I'd had with David because I'd spoken to him throughout the day, and I did ring him that night as I was returning his phone call. But it wasn't tipping off David Evans about Essendon was the club because we didn't know who the club was now.
So what were your discussions with David Evans through the day and the night?
Well, what had happened during the day, Neil, is that David and the Essendon Football Club had been receiving calls from media around speculation around the use of supplements. And the AFL had also received calls. We'd had calls from John Perrick of The Age, we'd had Damien Barrett, and David rang and said, look, we're getting these calls, do you know anything about it? I confirmed that we'd had similar calls, and he went down to the club, he started to ask questions, and he started to find out things. He found out things about consent forms and other things, and he became quite disturbed, and he called a meeting. In fact, that's probably the only bit of the story that got some validity. There wasn't a crisis meeting that night. And, of course, as David found out more and more things, he rang me to tell me if I knew any more. I kept saying, I don't know any more, David. I don't know who the club is. And he rang me, and I returned his phone call, Neil, at 9 o'clock that night after I put my children to bed, as I do with most other people. And he asked me again, and I said, David, I don't know anything because I'm not aware of the club.
But did you tell him? Did you tell him you'd been briefed on the 31st of January by the Crime Commission?
No, because we were subject to confidentiality.
Okay.
But there's no doubt that we spoke because he was agitated because all the media, and you've got to remember there were media covering and trying to find out about this for weeks. In fact, Damien Barrett had filed an interview with Kyle Reimers weeks earlier that he was about to show on the footy show. It had been in the can for weeks.
But you must have put two and two together. You got a brief from the Crime Commission. You got David Evans and the media ringing about suspicions around Essendon. You must have had a fair idea what was going on.
No, because Neil, when we had a briefing from the Australian Crime Commission, they made it clear that there were several clubs that could have been implicated in both illicit and the use of performance enhancing, and they wouldn't disclose who the clubs were. In fact, we sought to get clarification because at that time all of our clubs were impugned, potentially that they were involved in the use of illicit / performance enhancing drugs. There was a player at a club, and they couldn't tell us, and they wouldn't tell us.
But you must have thought that when these calls happened that there was a chance Essendon was one of the clubs involved.
Of course I did, Neil. But that's different than saying I rang David Evans specifically to speak to him that night and say, oh, by the way, David, I'm tipping you off. Asada's about to investigate you. That simply didn't happen, Neil, because we weren't aware of it. And it's simply untrue. And the witness statement that was given to Asada, which is correct, was then investigated by Asada, who spoke to 3 other people at the meeting who denied it, Neil. And in fact, they accepted that explanation because I've never been asked about it, Neil, by Asada.
Okay.
It's not true.
And your recollection is that you didn't say anything to Evans or anybody else about briefings about from the Crime Commission or ASADA?
No, because we were subject to confidentialities, and we respect that. I mean, we've got jail sentences now. We've got potential $50,000 fine. So it is simply untrue now that the inference in this article is that the AFL tipped off Essendon before the investigation was announced because we didn't know who the club was now. It's just simply untrue.
Are you annoyed by I mean, this is clearly, to some extent, leaked from the investigation because they're talking accurately about what some witnesses said.
Well, we know who the witness is, Neil, which I won't go into because it's in the witness statement in the report. But it's also in the report, I believe, that other people were spoken to and that ASADA discounted it.
So where's the report?
Well, the report's hopefully being finalised.
So how do the Herald Sun know what's in the report?
Well, they would have spoken to the witness, Neil, who's made this allegation about the so-called conversation, and the witness has obviously spoken to them.
Are you concerned by that?
Not really. I'm not concerned. I mean, they would have spoken. I mean, what's going to happen up until the report is released? We're going to get a lot more of this now. You've seen it in the last few days. You saw an allegation the other day that the AFL had done a deal with ASADA, which wasn't a deal. I mean, these things are going to happen as we go forward. But now, I'll say again, you heard me say this on your program last week, I think it's very important that we get to the end of the investigation and that all of the report is revealed so that people get the answers that they're looking for. This article today is not correct, and furthermore, Neil, it has no impact on the investigation, no impact on the outcomes of the investigation.
Okay, it's also reported that some of your officials, Gillan McLaughlin and Brett Clothier, met the Essendon people the day after that meeting so that the meeting's the night of the 4th of February, and there's a meeting with your officials on the 5th. Did you set that up with them? Did you arrange that?
No. Well, that's not entirely accurate.
Okay.
There was a meeting the next day because David Evans contacted the AFL the following morning after his crisis meeting that night, and he asked to come in. And he met with Gillan McLaughlin. He didn't meet with Brett Clothier because Brett Clothier was at another meeting.
Okay.
And he then, and following that meeting about all the things he discovered the day before, he asked the AFL to launch an investigation into Essendon. The Essendon Football Club called for it. So that part is true.
So when did you first hear of the Essendon, that Essendon was the club involved? Or a club?
Well, on that particular morning, I was called to a briefing at the Melbourne airport by the Australian Crime Commission, members of the federal government, and the other major sports about the press conference that was going to take place 2 or 3 days later. So I wasn't aware that Essendon had actually come. I was aware that they were coming in. I wasn't aware that by morning's end that they wanted the AFL to investigate. So I became aware when Essendon asked the AFL to investigate that it was more than likely that Essendon was the football club.
Okay. And just to get it clear, you haven't seen the report yet, even though it seems that some of it at least might be leaking. You haven't seen it?
No.
When do you expect to see it?
Well, again, I'll repeat what I said the other day. We expect that sometime during August now. Okay. That's the timeline we're working to, that we will receive the report.
What's going on here? What has happened here? Why is this issue out there as it is today? I mean, who's selling it?
Look, I don't know, and I don't know the motivation. I'm not quite sure. And furthermore, I don't think it matters to the investigation. I mean, ASADA, in fairness, have done a very thorough investigation. It's taken months. It's probably taken longer than people wanted. But everyone wants to get to the truth. Everyone wants answers. And these sorts of things that crop up, and these innuendos and inferences and stories, even when you deny them, Neil, I mean, David Evans has said it's not true. I've said it's not true. 3 other people have said it. ASADA have believed that story. It still gets written. I don't know, Neil, but you know what? It doesn't make any difference to the outcome of the investigation.
Thank you for speaking to us. Did you go to the MCG last night?
I did.
What did you think? One of the greatest moments ever at the MCG?
Look, I'll tell you what was one of the very special moments in sport, Neil, and I'll say this genuinely. Hearing 95,000 people sing "You Will Never Walk Alone" was quite moving and quite incredible. It was very It was loud, it was passionate, and I think it's a great credit to the public. It was a really special moment.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much for your time.
Cheers, bye-bye.
Andrew Demetriou, Chief Executive of the AFL.